Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. Apologies for the 2-minute delay, a little bit of technical difficulty. My name is Callum McCann. I'm a senior developer experience advocate at DBT Labs, and I'm here to be the MC of More Metadata, Less Problems. So joining me on the stage shortly are going to be Marion, who is a senior analytics engineer at Mux, and Kevin, who is the CEO of Metaplane. If you are interested in engaging or have any questions during the talk, please go to Coalesce More Metadata Less in the Slack channel, where we will have some admin and some moderators who will identify those questions, and then the speakers will hang around for an hour or two later answering all of them in the Slack channel. So without further ado, let's give them a hand.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming today. Is everyone having a good time at Coalesce? Yeah, for sure. Only day one, though, so keep some in the tank. But I am really, really grateful today to share the stage with a good friend and partner of ours, Marion, at Mux. We had a lot of fun preparing this talk, and hopefully it's equally as much fun listening to us talk about more metadata, less problems, sharing how Marion has taken two companies on a metadata journey as they grew in headcount and data size. And then in the middle there, we're going to sneak a little bit of a Metaplane demo as well. And that's essentially what we're going to be talking about today. Marion's going to be sharing her story over the past several years. That's the real meat of the talk, sorry, impossible burger of the talk. And, but to start it off and to end it off, we'll be talking about a little bit more of the landscape. Like, how did we get to where we are today? And what might metadata look like in the coming years as well? And without further ado, hand it over to Marion.
Thank you, Kevin. So let's all acknowledge it. In the last few years, it's been increasingly easy to assemble data stacks. And as you can see on this beautiful DBT lineage with a little tree on the far right, like, complexity is abstracted. It's very easy for an end user to think that their dashboard is really the thing of the data stack, but what's behind the forest is completely abstracted. And the implication is really, as an analytics engineer or data org, it's really hard to keep track of what is happening in your data warehouse. And it comes with a lot of complexities derived in cats of every possible sort. It comes with a lot of complexities, but solutions which are to be found in metadata. Let's have a look at an example at a large company growing a data warehouse in order to serve more users. What does it mean to grow a data warehouse? People use your data. You have more teams, more eyes on your data. Data consumers rely on this data, possibly in their day-to-day job. There's more data that you're ingesting, more dashboards, transformations. You need to know which source system eventually you need to reach out to, or which engineer you need to reach out to if something's wrong. Some transformations or dashboards might become critical. So you need to be able to handle an incident like a whole full stack team would. Growing also means governance, compliance, audit. Somebody might ask you what tables you have, what permissions are in your table. Do you have PII? What is the content of this? It's just really hard to keep track as you grow, as you ingest, and as you build. One way to solve this first is to have a robust data organization. I'm going to reference a Coalesce 2020 talk, just so we can hear. Oh, how do I click on? Sorry. Yes.
All right.
Trying to amplify a couple of weeks ago, and it's something that she said, so I can't take credit for. but something that really stuck with me, where data problems for the end user are not just an analyst problem. So data problems far up in the data pipeline are not just an engineering problem. Any data problem really is a full stack problem. And the spoiler alert, my belief is that we need a full stack team to address those full stack problems.
Sorry for the slow audio issue. TLDR is your data is a product, whether it's a pipeline or a dashboard, and you need a full stack team to address any issue. Because again, to the VP who is looking at a KPI, they don't care what's upstream. They don't care whether a production system was down. KPIs have to match, the metric has to match. Let's now have a look at problems more specifically and challenges that can come up as you grow your data warehouse. We'll first talk about time and turnover, the fact that you have more users consuming your data, and also what it means to ingest more and build more. What about time and turnover? Well, again, I know I keep repeating it, but everything becomes more complicated after a while. You're a consumer of data. You're also a producer. But at the end of the day, if something is changed upstream, you're usually the last to know. Field name has changed. It's breaking. You didn't know about it. On top of this, the company evolves, and so does the internal stack. So maybe your marketing tool is being deprecated. Maybe the KPI definition was changed, and suddenly you need to do a backfill, which after a few years might actually be expensive. Also, people leave the company, knowledge gets lost. Even your day-to-day tools can change. A database migration, new transformation tool, or even implementing a new BI tool, and yay, migrating dashboards. What else comes with growing the data warehouse? Well, a good problem to have, more users. What comes with it is more eyes and possibly somebody looking into a data set for the first time. Issues just get noticed faster. And before you know it, users are asking you on Slack, why do numbers don't match? An account executive, for instance, would absolutely know what the revenue of a customer is. The person who builds the table may not know, and therefore, when the user looks at it, they'll be like, this is wrong. So you need to fix the issue and also make sure you communicate, because what you really don't want is for stakeholders to lose trust in the data, start going elsewhere, and eventually find ways to export CSVs, transform data themselves. You really don't want this. What else, again, building and growing the data warehouse? More tables and queries. Depending on the database you're using, it could mean that costs increase. You will usually know about this when you're in production and you have an actual, real load of data, because you might have a subset of it in dev. You also need to clean up. I was just talking to somebody about a graveyard of tables and dashboards that could use some cleanup. And also give some love to your data warehouse. Find long-running queries, and you could also, improve them. If you don't do this, what can happen is this, which you may have seen or experienced or sensed. A dashboard's wrong. If you want to make it worse, think about this VP again telling you that it's wrong. You'll try to first figure out who's maintaining this dashboard, whether there was an issue upstream. You're going to try to figure out what tables are being used in this dashboard. Try to go up transformations in lineage, but maybe you don't have lineage. maybe your table's out of date. And while you're trying to figure this out, you're also trying to communicate with stakeholders, being like, hey, we're working on this, we're trying, we'll get there. It's tough. It's a really tough position to be in. So what we found is looking into metadata was helping a lot in this whole process of growing the data warehouse and being a little more sure about how things are. So it's all about really leveraging metadata so you can answer all these questions, and at the end of the day, it really comes down to tracking everything. Finding metadata is easy, and frankly, so many people talk about it today. I feel like I'm stating the obvious, whether it's in the information schema of your database, Snowflake schema, or talking about BigQuery, job history and results. This JSON representation is actually a BigQuery job output. You can see that you have some useful info to learn about your ecosystem. And you can very easily derive query patterns or who is querying this data, and eventually just a summary of a job, which is a query or a data load, and easily find metadata about this. All of this to answer questions, detect anomalies based on this metadata so that you can know before users do. Again, like you really don't want to know this from users. You can also optimize. If a query is really long, how can you optimize it? And also you could, in a big organization, try to attribute cost by team or tool. Looking at how people query data, you can educate users. All the select stars might need some help. A lot of failed queries also, like people might need assistance with this. And again, this graveyard, clean up. If it hasn't been queried in 3 months, do you need it? Maybe not. And again, tracking it. I know it sounds like stalking your users, but that's it. Like, the goal is to be informed so you can react faster. If you look to the right, it's fairly easy to go from your data sources to transformations, and where you're transforming and aggregating data, you can also easily have a parallel workflow where you're storing metadata. So for instance, here, just the job name, the run date, and the number of rows inserted will give you a rough idea of how many rows you should be inserting every day into your data warehouse. Building on this, you can think about setting up alerts and building dashboards, such as a Datadog anomaly dashboard, so that you learn over time how this trend goes, and if it deviates, you will be alerted. So again, if it can go wrong, make sure you track it so that when it happens again, something's wrong. This time you won't know from your stakeholders, but you will get an alert. You will be able to find dependencies between tables. You'll be able to have a starting point to investigate. You will be able to know who to communicate to because you know who is using a dashboard or a table. And while you're fixing it, you will just give a better impression and show that you're proactive and on top of it. Some limitations about this, anything you build has to be maintained. It sounds easy, but with everything I described, any change can lead to some hours of maintenance. It can get very cumbersome to add everything. It's hardly scalable, and at the end of the day, if it's built but needs maintenance and somebody leaves, it's the kind of stuff that nobody really wants to own. So on this, I will leave it to people who have tackled this issue. There are plenty, but Kevin's here to talk to us about Metaplane.
Trying our best, and I love every time we go through the talk. What you're saying resonates so much. And could you raise your hand if you've encountered some of those issues? All right, OK, so you came to the right room, and boy, do I have a demo for you. I'll keep it short and sweet. Let's just say that at Metaplane, we're not big fans of the state-of-the-art testing framework called EDT, executive-driven testing, as Marion just described. It's just like, OK, this information exists, and machines also exist. So can we please combine them together to save us some time and ideally preserve some trust, which is very easy to lose and extremely hard to regain. Like we've had those one-on-ones and Slack messages being like, can I just double check the data real quick? It's like, OK, there goes my afternoon. But we can go ahead and do that. And at Metaplane, wish me luck with this demo. This is the first time that I will do, that is not the demo. Oops, sorry. Sorry, everyone. This is a little bit of a mess. I play a lot of video games, but nothing is a match for this. But I'm starting off on the homepage because our philosophy is if you have a database, you should be able to trust the data within the data warehouse as well. And to get started with Metaplane, I'm just going to sign in. You can sign in with Gmail, with your email. In this case, don't laugh at me. My email address is whoiskevinwho@gmail.com. And this demo really has 3 parts. One is to connect your data sources. You've probably seen a billion screens like this before. I'll skip past that real quick. The second step is to connect an alerting destination, like Slack or PagerDuty or email. And the last step is to configure some monitoring. So every time you add one application, for example, Snowflake, and add another application like dbt or Looker, that will automatically extract the lineage in between all of the applications. And the reason for that is going to become apparent in just a second. And with Metaplane, you get a couple of things right off of the bat. The first thing you get, thank you everyone for being a great audience as I struggle with this, is column-level lineage between your warehouse and downstream BI applications. So on the right-hand side, which none of you can see, you have a mode report, and on the left-hand side, you have your data warehouse, and kind of drill down into this table. OK, which column leads to which integrations, and in these integrations, you can drill down into reports or to specific columns. You have schema changes. So if any of you work on large data teams or have the, you know how it is, upstream engineers who are merging in migrations but not telling you, now you can connect it to your transactional databases, and Metaplane will alert you whenever the schema changes. And the third piece is that you have table usage. So as Marion was talking about, if a dashboard goes down and no one uses it, did it really go down? Well, for our purposes, no one has to know. But Metaplane parses your query history and says, OK, these are the people using these tables, how often, on which warehouse, and which role, and et cetera. And the reason that we collect all this information is ultimately to help you set up data tests. And here is the data test screen of Metaplane. On the left-hand side, you see the information schema, database schema, table columns. You see how often those columns are being used. And across the top are different types of tests. So some tests we view as more foundational, like row counts and freshness and schema changes. Other ones are, actually let me zoom in a little bit. Is that better? OK. Other ones are on the column level, like I want to track the cardinality of an enum, for example. I want to track the uniqueness of a primary key because Snowflake doesn't enforce that. I want to track the distribution of a KPI or an input metric into your machine learning model. And our philosophy is, if it's not easy to add tests, you will not have tests. You're all busy people, and if you want to add a test, for example, tracking the nullness of this ID, click a button, and that's what you get. And what it means is that every hour, we now retrieve that value from your data warehouse. If it's in the metadata, that's great. If it's not, we will run the query for you. And in the background, with this long historical record, we have an anomaly detection model that tries to take trends and seasonality. No one wants to get these alerts on the weekend into account. But then when there's a dip, for example, with one customer's MR retention table. It's like 2.6 million rows growing monotonically, and then it tanks to 200,000 at 5:06 in the morning. And that's probably not what you want to see. It's not what they wanted to see. But Metaplane sent them an alert, and they were able to mark it as an anomaly and say, OK, continue alerting me on this. But thank you for letting me know, because they were able to remediate it before anyone on the team actually noticed. And a second example of an alert is, OK, here is an e-commerce customer, and they're tracking the freshness of a customer orders table in Redshift. And this is usually updated every 45 minutes. That's pretty good, until it's like midnight, and it's been 3 hours, and it's 9 in the morning, and it's been 12 hours. And you probably all have seen a situation like this before, right? But in this case, we alerted the customer that, OK, this table is quite delayed, it's 12 hours behind. We're going to send you an alert about it. And the last thing I want to show you is what we call an incident. And this is a piece of work that we're really proud of at Metaplane, where like your data does not live in isolation, right? If one table goes down, it probably lives somewhere in the DAG, and there's many related tables that could be related to help you debug and assess the impact. So instead of sending you a naked known lone alert, we try and wrap things up into the data equivalent of a trace in Datadog or in SignalFX, where we take the lineage and the type of an issue and the timing into account. So we say, OK, here are all the issues that have occurred that are possibly related. And now you can start from here. You can look at the lineage, the downstream lineage, to assess what the impact might be. If no one is using this table, again, let's forget about it. And we also include the upstream lineage and recently the related PRs that might have affected this table. And that's what we consider the quantum unit of information. Oh, sorry if we didn't tell you that.
No, but yay.
This is what we consider like the quantum unit of information for triage, right? 3 things to triage. Is this a real issue? OK, yes. Does it matter? OK, yes. Can I do anything about it? Yeah. And when you have yes, 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 all right, now we're talking. And I swear that's the last demo that we're going to give. And we're really lucky at Metaplane to be working with, well, one, amazing customers, and also to do to help save people time and preserve trust in data. Because ultimately, you're at Coalesce. It's easier than ever to transform data. But if you don't trust data, you're a little bit lost at that point. And with that, if we can figure out this, I will hand the mic back over to Marion. And
this time I'm going to talk about Mux, which is the company I joined in April of 2021. Think about what Stripe is to payment. Mux is to video. And so we started building the data warehouse. The great thing is we had an almost blank slate, and we're building a data warehouse from almost scratch. My colleagues and I had learned from the past about what was working and what wasn't, so we started to keep everything clean, thinking we're safe. But as we opened up the data warehouse to users, we had a few what I call dormant issues, which is exactly what Kevin showed. You have less rows coming in, nothing's breaking. You won't know until somebody tells you, which is what happened. The same table was impacted several times, meaning same table, same downstream tables, same dashboards, same people looking at it. Again, this stakeholder trust that you don't want to lose. So we wanted to get ahead of these issues and be alerted first so we could take action. The problem is what I described as limitations. Like, we didn't have time to build this nor to maintain everything. And the best solution was, well, we use DBT, and I'm not going to praise DBT because we all know why we're here, but thank you for table lineage and documentation and all these really nice transformations. On top of this, DBT provides testing, the reason why we also added Metaplane was for monitoring, where you can actually have this like, anomaly, trend, deviation detection. And also the report lineage that allows us to really find right away what is impacted by a table issue or just a data issue. And this is how we grew. I know it's a lot of graphs, but the number of queries executed over time in roughly a year, the number of DBT models, same, like we just grow, and I'm gonna go really fast here because we're almost out of time, but the stack is really standard, and again, like really grateful to know that if something is wrong, at least we'll be alerted first. And on this, thinking ahead, how can we think about what metadata is gonna be in the future and how can it be used?
Honestly, what I'm about to say is probably less interesting what Marion is, so I will be very quick about this and say that even though we're working with dozens of teams, hundreds of teams with data observability, us and our entire category are barely scratching the surface, right? We're monitoring the symptoms of data quality issues, not the causes. We're focusing on trust within the data team, but ultimately data is used and consumed outside of the data team, so how can we encourage trust on those layers as well? And finally, the most important thing is Metaplane is very useful for aiding day-to-day work, but what about higher level strategic work of how should we be allocating our time? I think that's what Marion is going to talk about right after this slide, where there's many types of metadata tools out there, whether it's a data catalog or a data observability tool, and they all use very similar types of information. So if anyone is confused between them, I don't blame you. I build one of these tools, and I'm still confused too. But as all of them come together, we want to see how can they address individual important use cases, but also combine them together and ultimately together help reach up the data hierarchy of needs.
Another thing to think of, thinking about the future, is buy versus build. Our talk was, I know, kind of cool when we submitted it. Now I feel like we're stating the obvious, and there are so many answers to these questions, whether they are products or packages. The theory still applies, but solutions are seemingly endless. And I would expect this for, be a little, acquisitions, like things to shift a little bit. That said, getting back to costs, monitoring is not free. Depending on what database you used, it is going to process data. So maybe at some point we'll be wondering about how much this is costing. And hopefully we can hope for, we can get more in product features. If a third party is able to give me my trends and lineage, why couldn't a vendor do this? Really? And at the end of the day, it's all a process, and it's not just a tool. When you start building a data warehouse, you don't even have metadata. So you just build this, and as you get going, you notice it can help you with incidents and anomaly detection. And building on this, you can find trends in usage, understand user behavior so that really you keep building data as a product and make it better, more user-friendly, and make sure you have everybody across your company, that they all know that data is there and that they can use it. Thinking about the future, the last one is really, how can we be really nerdy about what's going to happen? You can apply any analytics to metadata, and you can probably get some suggestions and assistance when it comes to, for instance, cleaning up. Hey, archive this table because I know it hasn't been queried in the last year. A tool could say this. You can also profile users, and if everybody's querying the same table, maybe you can suggest them to look at a specific dashboard, or tell the data analyst to build this dashboard because everybody's querying a table in the same way. I won't get into costs and workload because there are so many presentations about this, but it's metadata. at the end of the day. And on this, thank you. I hope this was useful, and if we have time for Q&A, I'm really curious whether you've faced this and how you've answered these questions with or without a tool like Metaplane.
Thank you all for joining us today, both in person and online. Unfortunately, we have no more time for questions, so if you do have questions, join us in the Slack channel that was mentioned earlier. I know there are already 2 pinned questions there. The speakers will be around for an hour or 2 hours answering any questions there, so please join us. Hope you all have a wonderful day. And I don't know if that's the right. You'll join us for another session in about 13 minutes. Thanks so much.